Welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven here in Jerusalem, Israel. All alone today as Rabbi Richman is in the United States. More about that in a moment. Today is the 28th day of the month of Marcheshvan, the year 5779. It's November 6th, 2018. This coming Shabbat, Parshat Toldot. These are the generations of Yitzchak. Toldot, generations. And other exciting things happening this week, which we'll be talking about throughout the show. Tonight, Tuesday night, begins one-day Ethiopian festival, Jewish Ethiopian festival, which has been carried over from Ethiopia, where it originated over the past millennia, into Israel, where it is held annually on the 29th day of Marcheshvan, which is tonight, tomorrow. It's held annually, a big gathering, and Armon HaNatziv, a hilltop overlooking the Temple Mount. We'll be talking more about that later in our show. And Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday is a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, bringing in the new month of Kislev. Kislev, of course, is the month in which Hanukkah is celebrated. So we'll be talking about that as well. As everybody knows, Rabbi Richman is in the United States right now on a speaking engagement tour with his son Hillel and with his wife Rina. And they spoke yesterday, Monday, for the first time on this tour in Loveland, Colorado. Wednesday, tomorrow, they will be speaking in Arkansas, in Rogers, Arkansas, tomorrow evening. And on Sunday, November 11th, they will be speaking at the South Plains Hebraic Center in Lubbock, Texas. It's never too late to join them. And if you are interested and would like more information, you can go to our website, templeinstitute.org, and you'll find a banner at the top of each page, which is a link to a page on the site with all the information you will need. Also on our Facebook page, you can find the information, times and venues and contact information, anything you might need if you want to take advantage and you're not too far away and want to join up and hear what the rabbi has to say and what Hillel has to say. Hillel is an archaeologist, and he'll be talking about the archaeology of the Temple Mount and the ramifications and what that means. The topic, the name of the presentation, the rabbi and Hillel, is The Holy Temple in Jerusalem, From Destruction to Rebuilding. So, you have 46 minutes with me today speaking. I hope I can keep your interest and not bore you. I'll try to stay focused and on point. Let's begin with the Parshat Toldot, which begins book of Genesis. It is chapter 24. And it actually begins with verse 19. Right, I'm sorry, chapter 25, verse 19. Ele toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham olidet Yitzchak, Yitzchak ben 40 shana bekachto et Rivka bat Betuel ha'arami Padan Aram, achot Lavan Arami lo leisha. Okay, these are the offspring. Actually, offspring is this stone edition translation of Toldot, which usually is translated as generations. I think generations is a more precise translation. These are the offspring of Yitzchak, son of Avraham. Avraham begot Yitzchak, and Yitzchak was 40 years old when he took Rivka, the daughter of Betuel, the Aramean from Padan Aram, and sister of Lavan, the Aramean, as a wife for himself. We, of course, learned all about that in last week's a Torah reading of Hayei Sarah. In fact, Yitzchak didn't exactly take for himself Rivka. Rivka was brought to him by Eliezer, who was sent on the mission by Avraham to basically determine the future of the entire nation of Israel. This is the first generation of the nation of Israel, not even called Israel yet, because Israel hasn't come into the world yet, the person, the individual, Yaakov/Israel. But Avraham entrusted this mission with a very trusted servant of his, the steward of his entire household, who we know to be Eliezer, who is mentioned numerous times in the past few parashot as being Avraham's very loyal and very capable servant, steward. Although his name is only mentioned once, it's very interesting that this virtual unknown was given so profoundly an important task by Avraham, who was older and probably not so mobile, and after having negotiated and purchased the cave of Machpelah to bury his late wife Sarah, he immediately earned his attention to the future of his people, of his son, and asked of Eliezer to swear to him that he would take on this task of finding a wife. And Avraham had two requirements. One, that he go back to where his people came from, where Avraham's people came from Aram, outside of the land of Israel, and find there a wife for Yitzchak, and that this wife agree to return to Yitzchak here in the land of Israel. And it was Eliezer, of course, who, in the course of his journey to Aram, basically decided on what the attributes of the wife that he was looking for his master Yitzchak would be. And of course, by determining that he would ask, he would wait at the well outside of the town where he knew Avraham's family was. And when he saw a girl come up, he would ask if she could draw some water for him. And if she readily agreed and then offered to draw water also for his camels, then that was the one. Meaning, he was looking for a woman of the qualities of loving kindness, of generosity, of reaching out to a stranger. And of course, the first woman who did walk up to the well was Rivka, who not only quite happily brought Eliezer water, but she brought for his camels water. And of course, I don't know how much water Eliezer could have drunk, a few cups worth, I suppose. But as we know, camels don't drink that often. When they drink, they store the water. So I think I heard that a camel might drink 5 gallons of water at a single sitting. And he had a number of camels because he wasn't alone. He had brought a number of people with him. And she brought water for all those camels, which it's not really mentioned specifically, but it was a lot of work what she did. And to make a long story short, she was the one, and Eliezer brought her back to the land of Israel, where she, at the end of last week's Parshat Sarah, she met her husband Yitzchak. They married, and as it says, Yitzchak was comforted following the death of his mother. And we pick up from there in this week's Parshat Toldot, which are the generations of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. But it immediately begins talking about the sons that are born to Yitzchak and Rivka right at the very beginning of this week's Parsha. Esav, who emerged first from Rivka's womb, and his twin brother Yaakov, who followed right behind with his hand clutching on the akev, the heel of Esav, which is why he got the name Yaakov, because he was clutching onto the akev, the heel of Esav. And so begins the story of Esau and Yaakov, of Yaakov and Esav, and from the very start, they're very different personalities. Esav is a hunter. Sigd befiv, the hunt was in his mouth, the verse tells us, which is interesting phrasing. Our sages say that there's a double meaning to that, not simply that he was a hunter, but that he hunted with his mouth. That means he was a slick talker. He was a bit of a devious character, and looking out for number one. And Yaakov is described as Ish Yosheb Ohalim, a man who dwelled, Ish Tamim, a simple man, a pure man, who dwelled in tents, meaning he was a homebody, I guess. One tradition holds that those tents were actually the tents of Shem, his ancestor, who was teaching the wisdom of the Torah in this tent, which was actually a school, and that Yaakov was being schooled in Torah. So while Esav took the path of an outgoing man of action, Yaakov took the path of a quiet, introspective thinker. And we're told immediately that Yitzchak, their father, loved Esav, and that Rivka, the mother, loved Yaakov, because Yitzchak saw in Esav a doer. Here was someone who could make his way in the world. He was a man of tremendous energy and action, and these are qualities that Yitzchak felt would serve Esav, would serve the Jewish people, would serve the destiny of what he was a part of. You need people who can do, who can achieve, who can make things happen. So he had an affinity for Esav. And I guess I'm sure he loved Yaakov very much as well, but Yaakov was a homebody, a quiet person. And I guess he felt that his destiny was not going to be as decisive for the future of the nation of Israel, which was just now beginning to grow. And then we immediately hear the story of the porridge. Everybody knows about the porridge that Yaakov sold to Esav. Esav was out hunting. He came back. He was very tired. He was very hungry. He said to his brother, "Give me something to eat." And Yaakov said, "I'll give you some of this porridge that I'm making, this red porridge, Edom red." And Esav said, "Great, I'm so hungry." And Yaakov said, "But there's a price. The price is you sell me your birthright because you came out earlier by seconds from the womb. You've got the birthright as the firstborn. So you hand that over to me, and I'll hand over this bowl of red porridge, red lentil soup." And Esav said, you know what? I'm going to look for the verse right now. Esav said, "Pour into me now some of that very red stuff, for I am exhausted." And Edom is red, and that's why he was also known as Edom. And Yaakov said, "Sell us this day your birthright to me." We're in chapter 25, that was verse 31. And Esav said, "Look, I'm going to die, so of what use to me is a birthright?" And so he sold the birthright. And Yaakov said, "Swear to me as this day." He swore to him and sold his birthright to Yaakov. And Yaakov gave Esav bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and got up and left. Thus Esav spurned the birthright. Very interesting here, because Esav said, and I'm going to repeat, "Look, I'm going to die, so of what use to me is birthright?" Esav, whose name Esav is from the Hebrew word letters ayin, Sin Vav, which means la'asot, to do, to build, to make. So he was a doer, he was a builder. In fact, some say that he's named Esav because he came out fully developed. He came out, he was very hairy, we know that. The Torah tells us that. He came out fully developed, which is a very phenomenal idea. But the downside of that is that there was no growth in him. He came out the way he came out, that's the way he was. He was not going to grow. He was going to do, he could hunt, he could be out there in the world, he could acquire, he could take, he could possess, but he had no spiritual side to him. He had no spiritual growth. He could not grow as a human being. In that way, he was stunted. And when he said, I'm going to die anyway, he was basically admitting to that. He said, listen, there's no life for me after death because I don't get that. I have no awareness of that. I'm a man of this world and this world only. So I'm going to live my life day by day. I'm going to hunt. I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to get what I need to get, what I want to get. And therefore, our Midrash tells us that he was an unscrupulous human being. Our Midrash tells us that he actually murdered people because he was out doing what he needed to do in this world as he perceived it, because there was no other world. There was no next world. There was no accountability. It's what you acquire in this world, what you make of yourself in this world, how big you make yourself, how impressive you make yourself. That's it. And that's the only thing. So he was hungry, and he needed to be fed so he could continue on his way. So this birthright really had no meaning to him. It was just a concept. It was an idea. So he readily sold it and went on his way. And as the Torah says, he spurned the birthright. So I think this is the real essence of the whole story of Esau and Yaakov, that Esau was very much a man of the world and very much a modern man and very much a man of modern Western society, you could say, which is very, very, very focused on the here and now, very focused on material gain. You are what you possess. You are what you can purchase, what you can acquire. Esav, he was a man that could do things, a man that could impress by acquiring what he wanted in order to fill his world, in order to fill the spiritual void which he had, which he really possessed, a spiritual void, a spiritual emptiness. And I think that's might be an apt description of the very extremes to which modern Western culture aspires, which is a very materialistic culture where we are what we own. We are judged by what we possess. We judge ourselves and others by our physical appearance, our external appearance, and there is much less interest in anything internal, who we really are inside. And Yaakov, on the other hand, that was his world. He had to learn, and he will learn. And of course, we're going to see how he learned to take that inner strength, that inner identity, that inner purpose, that inner understanding of who he was, and apply it in the world, in life, in order to push forward, in order to push his people forward, in order to make his way in the world. We're going to see how that happens. He sort of had to be forced, and ironically, he was forced ultimately by his brother Esav, who grew very angry when Yaakov quote, stole from him the blessing of their father, which is how the Torah reading, the Parsha this week ends, that Yaakov is forced to flee on his own, to leave the comforts of his home, to leave the protective environment, the cocoon that his father and mother provided for him, and to make his way in the world, which he will ultimately do quite successfully. But this is the struggle that is focused on and highlighted in this week's Parsha. And there's another thing going on here. In fact, it's going on all throughout the book of Genesis. When God created the world, it was on a macro scale, right? It's an entire world. God created it 6 days. The world, it's beautiful, it's perfect. God creates man, and God puts man in the center of this world in the beautiful Eden, the Garden of Eden, and says, okay, one thing you can't do, everything else is yours, and everything's going to be beautiful. And of course, man wasn't able to abide by that one stipulation, because man said, you know what? Why should I have any limitations? And so man, being Adam and Eve, ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And we know the rest of the story. So God has to now, rethink things, as it were. And his God's creation of this perfect world has gone awry. And we read by the end of the first Parsha in Genesis, Bereshit, that God grows totally disgusted with mankind. The flood comes, man's wiped out, except for Noah. And God starts all over again with mankind. And now God has changed his focus from trying to deal with mankind, with humanity on the macro level. There was after the flood, then there was the Tower of Babel, and that was another fall for man. Oh, here's the music. Boy, time sure flies when I'm talking a lot. Stay right with me. I'll be back. We'll continue this right where we left off. Temple Talk. Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is still Yitzchak Reuven here in Jerusalem, Israel, still all alone. I hope you're still with me. I hope I've have kept your attention. And today is the 28th day of the month of Marcheshvan, 5779, November 6, 2018, Election Day in America. We are reading this week Parshat Toldot. We're going to return to that in just a moment. We're going to be talking about the holiday of Sigd, which begins tonight, continues tomorrow, and also the 2-day Rosh Chodesh, celebration of the new month of Kislev, which begins Wednesday night, and it's a 2-day, so it goes through Wednesday night all the way through Friday. And let's jump right back into where we were. We're talking about God's evolving, developing approach to this amazing creation that he created in 6 days, and then grew disgusted with mankind in 10 generations, the flood, and then there was the Tower of Babel, which, again, a society being developed of all humanity, which God did not, he would not suffer that particular society and toppled it. And now, with the advent of Avraham and his reaching out to God and the connection that God made with Avraham and the covenant that God made with Avraham, God is focusing, and the Torah is focusing on family. Because family, as we are learning in these very parshiot in this book of Genesis, is really the heart, the nucleus of everything, and there is no future for mankind. There is no future for creation without a strong and healthy, viable, workable family at the root and at the center of everything. And as we see, these families, they're Avraham and his wife and their children, and now Yitzchak and Rivka and their children, they're not, work needs to be done. Okay, you could say they're dysfunctional to some extent. Work definitely needs to be done, and of course when Yaakov has children, and there's a huge conflict between them, which leads to a disastrous situation, which is only finally resolved positively at the very conclusion of the book of Genesis. But that is part of this development and ironing out and working out of healthy dynamics between husband and wife, between parents and children, between brothers and sisters. And it's at the root of everything. And that's what the book of Genesis is all about. And the book of Exodus, and the Exodus from Egypt, and the revelation of Torah at Mount Sinai couldn't happen. Israel couldn't become a nation if it hadn't first developed the principle of family life, of family structure, family, community, tribe, nation. That's the way it works. And that, when you hear people say that, the family is at the heart of Western civilization, or at the heart of Judeo-Christian culture, yeah, this is where it comes from. And it really is at the heart. And you can't get away with it, and you cannot build a society that tries to work around it and not with it. All the isms, socialism, communism, capitalism, fascism, they are all attempts, ultimately, if taken to their extreme, to basically obliterate the family at some level and create a mechanized Esavian society, because it's a society of, yes, doing, of achieving, of building, of creating physical, material realities. A tower of Babel, which reaches all the way up to the heavens. We're doing that today. We're always doing it. That's the Esavian aspect of mankind. But the real, true destiny of man is to develop this spiritual connection with our Creator, with God, and an affinity for one another as an expression of that spiritual connection. And that's what the book of Genesis really is talking about. Some conflicts, and there's stories, and there's intrigues, and there's history here. But the real central theme is creating a family that can live together and love one another and bequeath that to the next generation. And once you have that, we can start talking about nationhood, and we can start talking about a covenant between a people and a God. Getting ahead here. So, with that, I'd like to close right now our discussion about Parshat Toldot, generations of Yitzchak, and talk about this holiday of Sigd, Ethiopian Jewish holiday, which has been celebrated, observed in Ethiopia for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. I think it was first mentioned, recorded in writing some 500, 600 years ago. And it was brought with the Ethiopian Jews, who made Aliyah to Israel, who emigrated to Israel en masse in the 80s and 90s. It was brought with them here and actually recognized as a national holiday, I think some 15 or 16 years ago by the Knesset. And it is a holiday that is celebrated on the 29th day of Marcheshvan, which is tonight. It's the last day of the month. And it is on the 29th because it is 50 days following Yom Kippur. Very similar to the 50-day following Passover, which of course is the holiday of Shavuot, and it has some shared ideas with Shavuot, in that, among other things, the central theme of the holiday is the reading from the Torah, and there is different understandings of how and when the holiday developed, and one of the understandings is that it developed as an attempt, as a quite successful attempt, as a means of preserving the identity of the Beta Yisrael, which is what the Ethiopian Jews call themselves in Ethiopia, especially in times of persecution from Christian rule, which ruled in Ethiopia for many centuries. And there were times when there was tremendous persecution. And on this day, the 50th day following Yom Kippur, entire villages would leave their towns in the morning after first preparing themselves, going to mikvahs, ritual baths, to purify themselves. And the ritual baths that the Ethiopians purified themselves in were actual rivers, because they lived in a land where there are many rivers, and ritual purity was a very, very, very central aspect of the Ethiopian practice as Jews over the millennia, in which they were very much separated and isolated from diaspora Jewry elsewhere in the world. And so there was no connection, physical or intellectual connection between this community and the other community. So their halacha, their observance of Judaism, which they brought with them out of Israel some 2,500 years ago, either at the end of the First Temple period or the beginning of the Second Temple period, they brought that with them. They have a tremendous emphasis on certain aspects of Torah observance that were of the utmost importance and centrality in those times when they actually were separated from the rest of the nation of Israel. Meaning, that's why I'm referring to the subject of ritual purity, which, of course, if you read the book of Leviticus, you read that ritual purity is a very huge and central and somewhat complex aspect of our observance of Torah, which, with the destruction of the temple, became less central and modified to an extent. But in the Ethiopian communities, it remained very, very, very central and very, very important. And getting back to the holiday of Sigd, the men and women would purify themselves on the day before. In the morning of the 29th, they would all leave the village. They would take animals, which they were going to be slaughtering later in the day. They would take them with them, slaughter in order to eat. And they would meet on a very high mountain. And they would actually, at the bottom of the mountain, they would gather rocks to make a perimeter. Just like on Mount Sinai, a perimeter was made at the bottom of the mountain to distinguish between the mountain, which was pure, and the area outside, which was not considered as being part of this pure area. and they would face Israel. They would face Jerusalem all the way from Ethiopia. And it was a day that began with fasting, prayer, and reading from Torah, with emphasis on the Sinai revelation, meaning from the book of Exodus, which deals with the receiving of Torah at Mount Sinai. And at a certain point later in the day, the animals would be slaughtered, and a great feast would be prepared, and of course the fast would end, and people would feast. And this was a very significant expression of solidarity, a community, a unity, and of course a reaffirmation of Torah. And one of the inspirations which the Ethiopians cite for this holiday are verses from the book of Nehemiah, where this similar type gathering is described. I think it's actually in Nehemiah chapter 8, I believe, and it says that Ezra it says, and he opened the book to the eyes of all the people, the book being Torah, for above all the people were, and all the people stood up and blessed the Lord. I'm actually reading a poor translation, but Ezra read from Torah at this. We all know this from the book of Ezra, that when the people were gathered in Jerusalem, and he also wanted to reinforce Torah and to rally the people to keep the commandments as they should. He read from the book of from the Sefer Torah, and the people all gathered there in Jerusalem, and that's what's done here in Sigd. The Sigd actually is an Aramaic word, which means in Hebrew hishtachave, which means to prostrate oneself, to prostrate oneself, to bow down, which is to this day a part of traditional Ethiopian prayer, actually bowing down onto the ground, which was always part of Torah observance. We do it today in the Temple Mount when we can do it, and often get arrested for doing it because the authorities don't like it. But it is very much a part of Torah Jewish practice, and that's the meaning of the word Sigd. Anyway, long story short, when the Ethiopian community moved from Ethiopia to Israel, they were looking for a central place to observe Sigd, and it was decided that they would, the essential observance, and you can observe it in any town, of course, but the central observance would be in Jerusalem, on what's known as the promenade in Jerusalem, which is a very beautiful open area, grassy promenade, which actually overlooks the Temple Mount. It's just south of the Temple Mount. It overlooks the Temple Mount. And in fact, tradition holds it that when we read about Abraham, when he's told by God to go to the place that I will show you, for there you will offer up Yitzchak, and it says that Abraham raised his eyes and he saw the place from afar, that this was where he was standing on this mountaintop when he raised his eyes and saw the Mount Moriah, which we now call the Temple Mount, from afar. So that's where tomorrow thousands of members of the Ethiopian community and many thousands, I hope, of not Ethiopian Jews here in Israel will be meeting there for a festive day. It's not a fast. It's not observed as a fast here in Israel, but it's very significant that they meet in this hilltop that overlooks the Temple Mount, because the 2,500-year-old central yearning of the Ethiopian community, Jewish community in Ethiopia, was Jerusalem, to return to Jerusalem. And for thousands of years, since they left before the destruction of the temple, they did not know, and they were isolated and cut off from other Jewish communities. They did not know that the temple had been destroyed. They lived their lives with the knowledge, as it were, that the temple still stood, and they longed to return to Israel, to return to Jerusalem. Although I must say there was historically, there were other Jewish travelers who went and visited them over the centuries, and when they would bring them knowledge of what was happening in the Jewish world outside of Ethiopia. And in fact, even in the book of Isaiah, there's a reference to the Jews, to Israel, who was exiled in Ethiopia, Cush, as that area was called in biblical times. Anyway, it's a very beautiful, very, very beautiful and colorful celebration. And it actually is very heartwarming also because we always say the month of Marcheshvan. Bitter Cheshvan is bitter because there are no Jewish holidays in it, but here we actually have an old/new Jewish holiday which is celebrated at the very end, next to last day of the month of Marcheshvan, called Sigd. Sigd's going to end tomorrow night, Wednesday night, and that's going to bring in the Rosh Chodesh, the monthly celebration of the new moon. This is going to be the new moon of Kislev, which of course is the month of the holiday, 8-day holiday of Hanukkah, which begins on the 25th of Kislev. And among the other things that characterize Kislev, it's also known as the month of dreams. Now, it may be the month of dreams because we're entering into the time of the year where the days are shortest and the nights are longest, and that means more time to sleep, and to sleep, more time to dream. But it's definitely known as the month of dreams because it is in the month of Kislev that we each year read the Torah portions where dreams appear and are featured. Next week, of course, we're going to read about Yaakov's dream of a ladder reaching up to heaven and angels ascending and descending. And then after that, we're going to read about Yosef's dreams of his own grandeur, as it were. And then after that, we're going to read about Pharaoh's dreams and Yosef's interpretation of those dreams, and also of the dreams of the two men that he met in prison, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker. So over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we are going to be reading a lot about dreams and their central role in the shaping and making of the nation of Israel. So that's the month of Kislev. Much, much more to talk about the month of Kislev, to tell you the truth. But I'm not going to tell you everything now, because in a couple of weeks, not next week, but the following, the rabbi will be back. And I'm sure he's going to have much to share about the month of Kislev. So I'm just going to hold back on that and let the rabbi discuss it when he's back in 2 weeks. We're about to close this show in just a moment. So before we close, I'd like just to say one more time, mention the rabbi's next 2 speaking engagements. On Wednesday, November 7th, that's tomorrow, in Rogers, Arkansas. And on Sunday, November 11th, at the South Plains Hebraic Center in Lubbock, Texas, the rabbi will be speaking, Hillel Richman will be speaking, and in Lubbock, Rena Richman will be speaking. Some people have asked who haven't been able to attend if there will be a recording that they could hear online. And my answer is, I hope so. We have plans. We do intend to have it recorded, at least in one of these settings, and hopefully we'll get that and we'll be able to post it in the near future. So anybody who missed it and would like to hear will be able to. And with that, I'd like to wish everybody a very, very happy Sigd holiday, which begins tonight and goes through Wednesday, and very, very happy 2-day Rosh Chodesh, bringing in the new month of Kislev, the month of Hanukkah, and enjoy, celebrate, feel good. And don't forget to vote if you're an American citizen. I think that's today's call to order. So, As I said, the music is about to begin, and I'm anticipating that. I hope I haven't bored you, and I hope my monotone hasn't put you to sleep. And if it has, I hope the music will wake you up in time to do what you need to do. So, thanks for being with me. Well, I'm signing off now. This has been... Okay, I'll wait for the music to start, which is going to start any moment now. And I'll say it one more time. This has been Temple Talk. Thanks for being with me. Temple Talk.